An explosion rocked the spaceport, sending a shockwave through the ground, rattling everything in its wake. Sparks erupted from the hull of the Stellar Dream, the high-end ship already shaking under the pressure of its failing systems. A loud, metallic groan split the air as the ship's engines stuttered and died, and in the distance, a frantic voice yelled, "We need help! Now!" Elliot didn't waste a second. He sprinted toward the source of the chaos, his boots pounding against the concrete. A mechanic by trade, he was used to dealing with the broken, the busted, the abandoned ships. But this one? This one was different. The Stellar Dream wasn't just a ship. It was a living, breathing thing. Sleek, beautiful, and advanced in ways Elliot had only heard about in rumors. As he neared the vessel, he could already see the damage. Smoke billowing from the engine core, red lights flashing wildly in every direction. But before he could even approach, a figure appeared, emerging from the smoke like she owned the place. She was tall, lithe, with dark hair that caught the light of the emergency alarms flashing overhead. Her every movement was deliberate, controlled. Nothing about her seemed panicked, despite the state of the ship. Elliot barely had time to register her presence before she was standing directly in front of him. "I assume you're the mechanic." Her voice was sharp, like a blade cutting through the air, and she didn't wait for an answer before continuing. "We need this ship running, now." This was Ava. Elliot nodded quickly, swallowing the sudden lump in his throat. He had seen plenty of people before. Desperate, frantic, yelling for help. But Ava? She wasn't like anyone else he'd encountered. There was something magnetic about her. Even in the chaos of the ship's breakdown, she exuded a quiet confidence. She wasn't worried. She was in control. "I'm Elliot. I'll get your ship fixed, but I need to know what's going on," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady as his mind raced with the technical challenges ahead. There was no room for mistakes here, not with a ship this advanced. The fact that it was still in one piece after the damage it had sustained was a miracle. She barely acknowledged his question, her eyes scanning the ship's exterior, a barely perceptible frown tugging at the corners of her lips. "Just fix it," she said simply, her tone making it clear she wasn't interested in wasting time with explanations. "It's complicated. I'll show you where to start." Ava turned without another word, heading toward the entrance of the ship. Elliot watched her, puzzled. She was so composed, yet there was something about her that seemed almost distant. Was she hiding something? Why wasn't she as concerned as everyone else? He shook his head, trying to focus. He had a job to do, and he was damn good at it. As they walked into the ship, the air inside was cooler, but still thick with the unmistakable scent of burnt circuitry. Elliot immediately got to work, his hands moving with practiced ease as he began to open panels and inspect the engine. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this job than just fixing a ship. There was something about her, the way she moved, the way she watched him. "I'll need access to the core," Elliot said, his voice steady. But the curiosity in his mind was growing stronger by the second. Ava didn't hesitate. She nodded, and for the first time she seemed to soften, just slightly, as she stepped aside to let him in. "You'll have everything you need. Just get it done," she murmured, her gaze flickering to him. But then just as quickly, back to the ship's malfunctioning systems. Elliot knelt down beside the engine, his mind already working through the necessary steps to get everything back online. The ship's exterior might have been pristine, but it was clear that someone hadn't been taking care of the Stellar Dream. Whatever was happening here went beyond a simple malfunction, and, as he worked, Elliot felt it. The pull. Ava was more than just the owner of this ship. She was a puzzle, one he couldn't stop wanting to figure out. Elliot's hands moved swiftly over the ship's core, a steady rhythm that had become second nature to him. The stellar dream was still in shambles, but with every connection he made, with every wire he repaired, the ship seemed to come back to life. It was delicate work, precise and focused, but Elliot couldn't stop the nagging feeling that this repair job was about more than just fixing a ship. It had been a few minutes since Ava gave him the order to fix the ship, her command cutting through the chaos with a chilling clarity. She hadn't said much, but her presence loomed in the background like a shadow, her gaze fixed on him, making him feel like he was being watched from every angle. There was something about her, something in the way she held herself, the air of authority she carried effortlessly, that made Elliot's usual focus slip. He could feel the weight of her eyes on him as he worked, and though he knew she was standing at a distance, it felt as though she was right next to him, her attention trained on his every move. She wasn't the type to hover or micromanage, there was no doubt about that, but he couldn't ignore the pull, the tension, that crackled between them as if the air itself was charged. Ava didn't speak much, but when she did it was always direct, short, sharp, and to the point. It was clear from the start that she wasn't one to waste time. She was calm under pressure, a woman of few words, yet her actions spoke volumes. Elliot found himself stealing glances at her, trying to figure out who she really was, what drove her, what made her tick. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a simple repair job. There was something about Ava, something buried beneath the surface, that made him want to know more. After another few minutes of intense focus, he stepped back, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. The ship's engines hummed softly, signaling that it was alive again, its systems slowly coming back online. He stood there for a moment, his hands still tingling from the work, the quiet tension in the air between them almost palpable. Ava hadn't moved, still standing at her post, her eyes scanning the status reports on the control panel. Her face was unreadable, but Elliot could feel the change in the atmosphere, the shift from cold efficiency to something more personal, more urgent. "How's it looking?" she asked, her voice steady but clipped. "It's running again," Elliot replied, nodding as he wiped his hands on his coveralls. "But it's still unstable. The damage to the core's worse than I thought. I can stabilize it for now, but you'll need a full overhaul if you want to avoid a bigger breakdown later." Ava turned, her gaze briefly flicking to the ship's readouts, then back to Elliot. "Stabilize it. That's all I need for now." Her tone was final, but there was an edge to it that made him pause. There was something more going on, something beneath her words. He couldn't place it yet, but it felt like she was running out of time. As he worked on making the temporary fixes, he couldn't ignore the tugging curiosity gnawing at him. Who was she really? Why was she so determined to keep everything close to the chest? There was an intensity about her, a kind of mystery that made Elliot want to push, to uncover the truth, even if it meant walking into danger. After a few moments of silence, Ava spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "I didn't think anyone could fix it that fast." Elliot glanced up, his eyes meeting hers. There was a flicker of something in her expression, a mix of admiration and something else, something unspoken. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the same cold professionalism she had worn since he met her. "I guess you don't hire just anyone," Elliot said, a small smile tugging at his lips. He was trying to lighten the mood, trying to find a way to crack the armor she had so carefully constructed around herself. She didn't respond with a smile, but there was a brief, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement, if nothing else. And yet, it felt like more than that. Just as Elliot finished the last of the repairs, the comms crackled to life again, this time louder and more urgent. "Warning, Unknown vessel detected. Approaching fast. ETA 3 minutes. Ava's face went pale, the shift in her expression instantaneous. For a brief moment, the steely mask she had worn since they first met slipped. She turned to the control panel, her hands flying over the buttons, her movements swift, practiced. Elliot stood frozen for a second. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just about the ship anymore. This was bigger. It was personal. He stepped closer, his voice quieter now, filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Ava? Who's come?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she paused, her eyes flicking over to him, calculating, weighing her options, deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight with something Elliot couldn't name. "Someone who doesn't want me fixing this ship." The words hung in the air like a threat, unspoken but clear. Elliot didn't move, his mind racing as the reality of the situation settled in. There was more to Eva than just the ship, more to this repair job than fixing an engine. She was running from something, or someone, and he was caught in the middle of it. The sound of a ship approaching echoed through the walls of the stellar dream, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in Elliot's bones. Ava didn't look at him again as she activated the ship's emergency thrusters, the engines roaring to life. The tension between them crackled in the confined space of the cockpit, and for the first time, Elliot wondered if he would make it out of this alive, or if there was more danger in being close to Ava than he ever realized. But there was no turning back now. The ship lurched forward, and with it, Elliot's world was suddenly thrown into chaos. The stellar dream hummed steadily beneath Elliot's fingertips as he ran his final checks. The ship, nearly fully repaired, was purring like a contented animal now, but even as he worked, his mind kept returning to Ava. She hadn't said much since the ship's engines came back to life, her face still set in that impassive mask, but Elliot could sense something different, something fragile, buried just beneath the surface. Finally, as he closed up the last panel, Ava moved toward him, her steps hesitant but steady. Her gaze met his, but there was a subtle shift in her expression, an openness he hadn't seen before, a crack in her armor. "I never thought I'd let anyone close enough to see me," she said quietly, almost as though she were speaking to herself. Her voice was distant, tinged with regret, but there was something almost raw in it. Something that reached out to Elliot in a way he hadn't expected. Elliot stopped what he was doing, wiping his hands on a rag as he turned toward her. He couldn't help but notice the change in her, the way the tension in her shoulders had loosened, how the sharp edges of her demeanor had softened. She was still guarded, but there was a vulnerability there now, one she'd never allowed him to see before. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," Elliot said gently, stepping closer, offering her the space to share on her own terms. Ava looked at him for a long moment, her eyes flicking to the floor as if weighing whether or not to speak. Then, with a small sigh, she took a step forward and let her walls fall, just a little. "I've been running for a long time," she began, her voice low. "Running from something, someone. It's not easy living like this, always looking over your shoulder, never knowing if today's the day it all catches up to you." Her words were soft, but there was an undeniable pain in them. "I don't let anyone close. I can't. People get too attached, and it's dangerous for them." Elliot stood silently, listening intently, his eyes never leaving hers. She wasn't just talking about the ship now. She was talking about herself, about a life she'd been forced to leave behind. "It's why I keep everyone at arm's length," Ava continued, her gaze distant. "It's safer that way. Safer for them. Safer for me." Her voice trailed off, and the silence between them stretched, filled only by the hum of the ship's systems. Elliot could feel the weight of her words, and something in him stirred. He didn't pity her. No. But he understood. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "You don't have to push everyone away. I won't judge you." Her gaze snapped back to his, her eyes wide with something. Surprise? Relief? It was hard to tell, but there was a flicker there. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "I do," Elliot replied, his words soft but firm. "I can hear the fear in your voice. I can see the pain in your eyes. And I won't walk away from it. From you." For a moment, she was silent, and then she took a step closer to him. She didn't say anything, but the tension between them had shifted, softened. It wasn't the same cold distance that had existed between them when they first met. There was a connection now, something deeper than either of them had anticipated. Later that evening, after the ship was humming quietly in the distance of space, Ava led Elliot down a narrow corridor, deeper into the ship than he had ever been. It was dark, lit only by soft, low lights that gave the ship a warm, almost secretive feel. They stopped in front of a reinforced door, its surface sleek and unmarred. "This is it," Ava said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is where I've been hiding everything." Elliot's curiosity was piqued and his eyes narrowed in question as she keyed in a sequence on the door's console. The door slid open, revealing a room unlike any other he'd seen in the ship. It was a lavish, hidden chamber, filled with art, books, and strange artifacts, all neatly organized and carefully preserved. But it was the sheer amount of wealth, power, and knowledge on display that left him speechless. This wasn't just a private collection. This was everything. Ava stepped inside, gesturing for him to follow. "You're the first person to see this," she said softly, her voice tinged with something like hesitation. Elliot stepped forward, his eyes taking in the room. He didn't ask questions, not yet, but his mind was reeling. There was far more to this woman than he had ever imagined. Eva walked over to a desk in the corner of the room, and with a deep breath she turned to face him. "This ship isn't just a ship," she said quietly, the words heavy in the silence. "It's my lifeline. Everything I've ever known, everything I've fought for, is in here." Elliot watched her carefully, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just about fixing a broken ship anymore. This was about her life, her entire existence. "I'm not just running from someone, Elliot," she continued, her eyes now locked with his, vulnerable yet strong. "I'm running from an empire. My empire. I was forced to leave everything behind to survive. The pieces began to fall into place. The coldness, the distance, the need to keep people away. It all made sense now. She was royalty. She had been part of something powerful, something dangerous, and she had had to leave it all behind to escape with her life. I never wanted any of this," she whispered, almost as though she was speaking to herself. "But now I don't want to keep running. I want a life. And I don't want to do it alone." Elliot's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this, not in a million years. But there it was. Ava was asking him for more than just help. She was asking him to join her, to be a part of her journey, to face whatever was chasing her. He stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. "You don't have to be alone, Ava. Not anymore. I'm with you." Her eyes softened, her lips trembling slightly, as if she were on the verge of saying something more. But she didn't. Instead, she just reached out, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her touch gentle, like a promise. "Then stay," she said quietly. Stay with me, not just as my mechanic, as something more, something real. For the first time, Elliot felt it, a connection that went beyond anything he had ever expected. His heart raced, his thoughts scattered, but in that moment, he knew he wasn't just fixing her ship anymore. He was fixing the broken pieces of both their lives. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something much bigger than either of them had ever imagined. The hum of the stellar dream was steady now, its systems fully repaired and operational. But the tension in the air between Elliot and Ava was palpable. The last few hours had been filled with intense moments, heartfelt confessions, a dangerous revelation, and an undeniable connection between them. As the ship glided through the vastness of space, they both knew that whatever was coming next, they would face it together. Elliot stood by the control panel, glancing over at Ava. She was focused, her fingers moving across the console with ease, but her eyes told a different story. There was something softer in them now, a warmth that hadn't been there before. The walls she had carefully built around herself were crumbling, piece by piece, and Elliot could feel it. Ava, still not looking at him, spoke quietly, as if the words had been on her mind for a long time. "I can't keep running forever," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but the vulnerability in it was impossible to ignore. "I've spent so much of my life protecting myself, shutting people out, never allowing anyone to get close enough. But I don't want to be alone anymore, Elliot. I can't do this alone. And I believe in us. In you. In what we could be together." Elliot's heart skipped a beat, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always known there was more to her than what she had shown, but hearing her finally say it, admitting she trusted him, that she wanted to take that leap with him, hit him in a way he couldn't have anticipated. For the first time in his life, Elliot didn't hesitate. He stepped toward her, his movements slow, deliberate, as if every step was measured by the gravity of the moment. "I'm not going anywhere, Ava," he said, his voice steady. "Not because of what you've given me, but because of who you are. The woman who's been strong enough to survive all of this, even when the world was against her. I'm here because I want you, Ava, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Ava's eyes softened, and for the first time a true smile touched her lips. Small, tentative, but there. The vulnerability that had once seemed like a weakness was now a strength, and in that moment, Elliot knew everything had changed between them. They weren't just two people thrown together by chance anymore. They were partners. They were choosing each other. The comm suddenly crackled, breaking the spell between them. The voice that came through was cold, impersonal, and as soon as the message hit the air, the entire atmosphere in the ship shifted. "Warning, enemy fleet detected, approaching at high speed. ETA 15 minutes. Ava's face went pale, the calm she had once exuded evaporating into thin air. Her fingers flew across the console, her body tensing with every movement. She didn't need to say anything. Elliot could see the fear in her eyes, the way her hands trembled just slightly as she fought to regain control of the ship. "The Empire," she said, her voice barely audible, as though speaking the words aloud made them more real. "They've found us." Elliot's stomach twisted, his own pulse quickening. The stakes had just risen. They weren't just trying to escape her past anymore. They were running from a powerful empire, one that wanted to destroy everything she had fought to build. "How many ships?" Elliot asked, his mind already racing through options, calculating their escape. "Too many," Ava replied, her eyes scanning the readings. "I can't outrun them alone, not with their fleet closing in like this." Elliot moved to her side, placing a hand on the back of her chair. "Then we don't run." he said, his voice firm, his resolve clear. "We fight." Ava met his gaze, the weight of the situation settling in. She had been running for so long, always trying to escape, but now she had someone by her side. They had each other. "Together," she whispered. Elliot nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Together. The next few minutes were a blur of preparation. Ava input commands into the console with a calm precision that belied the storm raging inside her. Elliot strapped into the seat beside her, his mind focused on the task at hand. They weren't just going to run, they were going to fight. And for the first time, Elliot truly understood the gravity of what that meant. The ship shot forward, the engines roaring to life with a fury that matched their determination. As the enemy fleet drew closer, the Stellar Dream soared into action, its advanced systems kicking into overdrive. The sudden acceleration threw Elliot back in his seat, but he held steady, his eyes locked on Ava. Her hands moved with ease over the controls, her focus absolute. But as the distance between them and the enemy fleet closed, she glanced at Elliot for a brief moment, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. "I won't let them take me again," she said, her voice a quiet promise. "Not without a fight." And with that, the Stellar Dream dove into the heart of the enemy fleet, a streak of fire and determination against the vast, endless dark of space. The battle that ensued was nothing short of chaos. The enemy fleet swarmed around them like a pack of wolves, their ships closing in on the Stellar Dream from every direction. Ava's hands flew over the controls, dodging blasts, weaving between enemy ships with expert precision. The ship's weapon systems fired back, each hit shaking the ship but never breaking their resolve. Elliot's pulse raced as he helped monitor the systems, keeping track of their energy levels and coordinating with Ava. He could feel her heart racing, feel the intensity of the battle in every decision she made, but through it all, there was something else. A spark between them that fueled their determination, their belief in each other. Together, they fought with everything they had. And together, they outran the Empire's forces. As the last of the enemy ships was destroyed or fled into the darkness, the Stellar Dream found itself in the quiet of uncharted space. The universe stretched before them, vast, unending, and full of possibilities. Ava and Elliot sat in the cockpit, their bodies still trembling from the battle, their breaths coming in heavy gasps. But in that silence they found something else. Peace. For the first time in a long time, Ava wasn't running. And for the first time, Elliot knew his life would never be the same. The Stellar Dream had survived. They had survived, and now, the future, their future, was waiting for them, together.